holiness, because we're not taught that. Where do I start? Make it personal. Where do you personally start? Time. Edwards was aware of the fact that time is precious and at the core of everything. At the root of all discipline is the disciplined use of time. Without this one, there are no other disciplines. I'm going to tell you a story, personal story here. A good friend of mine, Jim Stowe, who you guys know. We're accountability partners. And Jim and I are a little bit organized, I would say. And Jim's probably more organized than I am. So we go on to this pursuit of holiness, basically where it comes down to, and disciplining our lives, and come up with spreadsheets and to-do lists and all these different things. And we got the check-offs going, and we're having accountability. And I should have brought my notebook. It's kind of fun to look at. And I tracked this for months and months, you know, and I'd read Jonathan Edwards, and if Jonathan Edwards can do it, I can do it. See, the problem is that's exactly what I thought. I can do this. Until we submit ourselves and submit our wills, that's what Edwards was way ahead of the game on. He understood what that meant. But it's not about the to-do list. He realized at the core of all of this talk, or all this disciplining, or all these resolutions was one factor, and that was time. If we don't think about this, and if you don't let it sink in, if you want to just try this on your own, try to discipline yourself, try to have your quiet time in the morning, try to be a good person, or I'm going to be a better person, and do it under your own will without submitting yourself, you're going to run into trouble. You're going to have a to-do list. And what happens to to-do lists? They get thrown away because we get tired of them. It's impossible. Is the Christian life easy?
It's impossible.
Exactly, Mark. You're exactly right. It's impossible. Does anybody disagree with that? Why is it impossible? Because we attempt to do things on our own.
Our own strength.
Our own strength. Hanging on a bar. How long can you hold on that bar? You know? Oh, a long time. Eventually you're going to drop off. Unless you're doing things in God's will. One of the elements of time is immediate action. How many of you guys set up goals? Okay? What do we usually do when we set up a goal? Today is what? Thursday? What's the date? Anybody? 19th of November. Okay, I'm going to start my goals. When will I start them? Well, this is the 19th of November, so I think I'll start them on December 1st. Well, you know, I got some exercise and stuff to do on Thanksgiving, Christmas, January 1st. Sound good? Yeah, January 1st. So we put things off. Edwards totally was opposed to that because he realized that one of his biggest issues was procrastination. As disciplined as he was, he fought with procrastination. I don't know about you guys. I'm fairly disciplined, but I'm a horrible procrastinator. I battle with procrastination. Procrastination. Edwards believed procrastination to be an obstacle to God's glory. Delayed obedience is no obedience. Ooh. It's like you got to pull the spear out on that one because it just hits home, doesn't it? So I'm trying to take this Jonathan Edwards and looking at him as a hero and to where we apply it to ourselves. This is not just learning about the man. It's how do we apply him being a hero and his character traits to us? just like we got with Sebastian Bach. Good lessons. Passion. Edwards was passionate about the disciplines in his life. 1 Corinthians 9:24, he saw the Christian life as a race. He would not grow complacent, but strive for the prize and run the race to win. How many of us actually do that? Or do we consider it even? Edwards, I think, was driven by this because of his pursuit of holiness. Self-examination. I think this is where it gets personal with each of us. John mentioned spiritual fathering. I think this ties in quite well with that. An unexamined life, in Edwards' view, is simply not worth living, for such a life could not bring glory to God. I'm not going to ask you guys to raise your hands. This one's a silent question. How many of you guys have accountability partners? I'm not looking for an answer. But how many of you guys have accountability partners and routinely meet with your partner to discuss things in your life? Self-examination. This is critical, guys. It's hard to be the lone warrior or the lone ranger out there and fight the fight yourself. Spiritual fathering has some of that same component. We first have to start out with a few things with the high view of God. We have to know where we are. We have to know what we want for His glory, not our glory. We have to know that it's good, better, and best. We shouldn't settle for being just good. We shouldn't settle for better. We should always strive for best. Would Jonathan Edwards be considered a hero today? Do you think?
No, not in our culture.
Not in our culture, was the comment. Well, why do you think that's true? Why do you think in our culture it's so difficult? It would be so difficult for someone with those character qualities to be considered a hero. It makes you think about the culture we live in and the ideals that men hold up. We look at men that are in a status position, and usually with money, don't we? Or the guy that has the better job in the office, down on the corner with the windows on both corners, you know. Those are the types of things we look at. But we wouldn't probably, even today, would we look at someone that had 70 resolutions to live their life in our church, let's say, and self-examine themselves daily?
Probably look at like an extremist.
Exactly, Mark. You'd probably look at him as an extremist.
Yes.
You would, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Even in our own church, I would almost guess. Character qualities and what we look at, what we hold up to esteem. Or what does God look at? That's the real litmus test. I told you we were getting personal here. Do you kind of sense that a little bit here? Are you settling for good when you could be striving for better or best? What's stopping you from pursuing a life that glorifies God? Have you ever considered how important and central the use of the Lord's, your time is, to Him? And then you got to ask yourself a question. Are you really committed? See, I think during the Enlightenment period and during Jonathan Edwards' time, there were a lot of people that were committed, that were led by these heroes like Jonathan Edwards, like George Whitefield. We have a little bit more difficult time looking for men like that, don't we, as heroes? You know something? I want to make another bold statement here. I think that there are heroes that are in this room that we can look at that exemplify good character qualities. They can help us to take that next step to go from good to better to best. And I think it's one of those things, if we take on the challenge as men, we can do these things as well. We can become heroes in our own families, to our wives, to children, by committing yourself. And I think that's important. Jonathan Edwards, he surely thought it was important. Okay, that's it.
We're going to
Any,
discuss a bit.
yeah,
There seem to be two things that would make great difficulty for Edwards in our culture. Number one, and you alluded to it earlier by implication, the idea of being strict. That is out.
yes,
In a self-indulgent era, it's out for almost all of us. His theology was much higher than ours. We think we're free agents. He thought he was a bondservant. And there's another one that's subtle. We've talked a little bit in our Worldview Roundtable about these barriers to reaching people with a biblical worldview. We talked about guilt. Remember, we talked about enmity, or things people hate. We can't run afoul of those. We think about affinity, the things that we selfishly want. We can't run afoul of those. But there's one other one that's interesting. It's guilt. If guilt isn't properly taken care of, it deforms the result. And I believe that Jonathan Edwards would have made almost everybody guilty. What he bumped into at Northampton was what was called the halfway covenant. That's the theology of the time. And he did not believe people that were nominal Christians who come from distinguished Christian families of 3 and 4 generations should be given the communion cup without a confession, real confession of faith in the Lord Jesus. So he ran up against the local aristocracy of entitlement. He made people feel guilty.
It's counterculture.
He'd be in trouble today, wouldn't he?
It's counterculture.
He was countercultural. But I don't know if that, from your studies, if that rings true.
Well, yeah, and I think that the one, go ahead, Mark, I'm sorry.
Didn't he, I mean, he didn't live in a culture because of the difference in times. We live in the culture of trivial pursuit. I don't mean to be, I mean, I know I have wasted personally. I have sat there and even when I'm doing something, I'm going, Mark, this is stupid. Even if you're laughing, it's still stupid. And when I look at certain things and I do the journaling, my journal shows the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beyond ugly. And what I realized real quickly was, if I don't get plugged into God the right way, this ain't going down the way it's supposed to go down, because I can't do it. I literally just said, Lord, it's got to be you, because obviously I'm not doing this very well.
John hit a very good point about guilt. And I think Edwards was very in tune with that concept. And that's the reason why, with his self-examination on a daily basis, well, what are we told in the Bible in 1 John? Confess our sins daily. Well, he took the confession of the sin and then kept tracking it to find out why that sin occurred. How many of us do that?
Conscientious. Yeah, conscientious. The word conscientious fits.
Yes, he was conscientious, definitely.
I think of thoroughness regarding procrastination.
With the mic?
I need the mic.
I can hear it.
Okay.
We think, yeah, procrastination, bad thing, waste of time, and then we move on. We're so quick with our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote several pages on procrastination. Because he took it to the end
Yes.
and realized this is arrogance in thinking that it's my time.
Right.
I'm
Exactly.
banking on time that's not mine.
Right.
So ultimately it's sin to procrastinate.
Exactly.
But he expands on that over many pages.
Yes.
And he would do that with everything.
I don't know if it would have mattered because of the airtight process that he apparently had to follow his walk with Christ. But out of curiosity, I wonder what kind of distractions that he had in his culture as opposed to our culture today. Because obviously we know we have a ton of distractions. I'm sure he did too, but I just wonder.
I think there were probably a lot of cultural distractions back then too, because you got to remember something. We live in a culture where we understand. We get up in the morning, we get ready to go to work. We go to work. We work 8 hours roughly, give or take. We go home. We eat dinner. We watch TV. We have a lot of free time. People back in 1700. When you went home, you didn't flip the lights on. You had to go saw the wood, chop the wood, kindle the fire. Meals were a lot more difficult. Didn't get the chicken out of the pen. I got to go get the chicken. Pluck them. And I mean, you start thinking about it, it was a much harder life, in the sense that their time was so valuable in the sense that it took so long to live. Look at us. We're plug in. We're easy. So I think some of the distractions, that's a great point. I think some of the distractions were time in the fact that it took more time to do things.
Just to survive, though.
Just a survival,
Just to
Mark.
survive. It wasn't like they're being distracted
Exactly.
between two things that are different as far as, am I going to enjoy myself this way, or am I going to enjoy myself this way? It was a matter of they had to do certain things or they weren't going to survive.
Their entertainment was a lot different than ours was too, because I mean, in schools they were taught from the Bible. They had a whole different set of rules that kids today have in our culture. The distractions that we have today are many. Theirs were just a little different.
There was another factor at work there. When you look at the Old Testament, you tend to see a general rule that the third generation in a family line loses the faith. That the Lord ends up chastising the culture just as a good father would discipline the child.
Exactly.
It was a very interesting thing that I did not appreciate. But in that era of about 1720 to 1740, which was almost the core of Edward's career, there was an enormous sexual looseness. And several of the preachers of that time saw it and were almost powerless to check it. And that's where some of the powerful sermons, like the famous one of Edwards,
Right.
you know the title if you want to comment, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
Right.
That got some feathers raised. But there were other great, the Mathers were speaking and so on. They all had a high view of God and they saw low living. Women were giving away their sexual favors in a very, very lewd way. So this was a low time prior to Whitefield coming on the scene with his itinerant preaching and preaching sin. We don't preach about sin in this era. We don't do it. It's a good way to be carried out of the church on your shield, preacher. And that was what they were facing in that time. So this was an interesting thing. You talk about distraction. The ladies, it is a dangerous thing to be a preacher. To be a righteous preacher is like being a righteous politician or a righteous professional athlete. When the ladies are throwing themselves at your feet. This was a very interesting facet, and I didn't know anything about that until recently. It was a very lewd era. Did you know that yet? No. That's really an interesting area. So distractions he had. This idea of discipline.
Yeah, it was.
Purity.
And it was I think it was a common thing during that time, John, the Great Awakening, Enlightenment period, that many people did journal. And they did do certain disciplines. That's why I brought up about Washington. And different people that were in prominence, I think, made attempts or tried to deal with the sin issues to guide their lives. I think Jonathan Edwards was fairly unique in that he was so riveted on this pursuit of holiness, I think in the right fashion too, because he understood what that meant, that he had to deal with that sin.
So he wasn't too worried about stepping on or messing up people's self-esteem?
Obviously he wasn't.
Because nowadays you can't say anything because you might mess with little Johnny's self-esteem, and he might be scarred emotionally for the next 40 years and in therapy for the next 20. So I mean, you got to say it just the right way, otherwise you can't say it.
It's very true, and I'll tell you, even in a church like ours, I mean, you can get into a program or a study of sorts, and someone starts to question and starts to throw out those hard subjects. What happens? People leave.
Right. Empties the pew.
Empties the pews. There was what was that book? Why do men hate going to church?
Yeah.
Who are in churches nowadays? Women. Women.
Dale,
Yes.
something that we brought up, we have in our biblical worldview roundtable, our young men's roundtable, something we call the Father's Corner.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of our features. We want to keep doing it. It's very important. But I've made the point several times that it is the job of the biblical father to form character. His wife will teach the children to be nice. She will teach them to treat people nicely on the surface, which is important. But the heavy lifting and the unpopular part falls to the father. And the griping is going to come against the father. It takes a lot of courage to hang in there.
And our culture totally emasculates.
Precisely.
Totally emasculates and go the opposite direction, which confuses the roles.
Yes.
It really confuses the roles. It's not about being this swashbuckler with a sword in your hand.
Right.
It's about being a man of leadership, building character in your children, standing firm for what you believe.
That is why we are working to form a biblical fathering ministry in the church. It is not easy.
No. Well, let's counter.
Getting young men is difficult because you're all being pulled in several directions. The older men are bothered because they feel guilty that they didn't do it up to the standard the Lord would expect. It has been very difficult to recruit a leadership team for this ministry. I've never seen the like of it before. But this idea of what's expected of a father is a very, very high thing.
Well, our culture teaches that. I think if you guys went home tonight and turned on the TV and started looking at it, I would guess within the first 5 minutes of watching any commercials,
Yes.
that you would see men in the stupid role. Men, we're looked at as buffoons half the time.
Yes, yes.
Because I think, personally, I have a mission as a Christian man to help teach other men how to be real men,
Yes.
Christian men. There's nothing to be ashamed of being a Christian man, because I'm not worried about the culture. I'm concerned about my obligation as a Christian to God, to submit to Him. These heroes, it's exactly what they're about.
Amazing story. You did a superb job today, Dale.
Yes.
Thanks, James. You have a closing one there?
Well, it seems like discipline and being strict is like a bad word these days. I mean, as a teacher, myself being a teacher, and if you hear the reputation, oh, that teacher's strict, it's like a bad word. You know, oh, that teacher demands discipline, that's like a bad word, even to parents these days. I've noticed a lot of parents are, even alarmed. Even youth pastors and stuff like that. I think if you find out, the parent finds out that youth pastors too, too much discipline and too
And that-
strict.
and
And
that's
he's not
be-
doing enough fun and not enough games and stuff like that.
And that's because they're not doing it. So, exactly.
Because it seems like also like this, the rules, the resolutions and stuff, and virtues, you don't see those really taught in our culture either.
Yeah.
And that might have gone away 100 years ago. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's like a recent.
Yeah. Was there one more comment over
Yeah,
there?
just real
Yeah.
quickly, out of
Sure.
curiosity, I wonder how you guys would think Billy Graham would stack up against a Jonathan Edwards. Like, Billy Graham seems like he's lived a pretty good life as a Christian.
I don't know, but I think that it's something to consider. But I think that one thing that's important about heroes is that I read that one paragraph about how he struggled with all these different disciplines. I'm sure Billy Graham, if we knew Billy Graham, struggled tremendously with the things in his life. But stack up wise, I think in our culture, Billy Graham has been an icon. He's been somebody to look up to.
He's one of the few that didn't disappoint his followers
Exactly.
after so many years. And I watched so many of these mega churches and the big flashy preachers rose, zenith, and then boom.
Because it was about them.
And left a bunch of people just wandering, going, "What happened here?"
That's a good point.
You didn't see that from Graham.
John Hull, who
Last comment.
John Hull, who was an elder here for over 17 years. When he was here, he was on Billy Graham's staff for 20 years. And he told me personally, he says, Billy Graham was the real deal. He said if he made a mistake, he had fully admitted his mistakes. He was very open, and he wasn't, there was nothing pretentious about Billy Graham. If you look at where he lives now and where he's lived in the past, he didn't sell out and take the high road financially or none of that.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our third segment. You are going to be